The morning of May 11th, 1943, over the submarine pens at Wilhelmshaven, Germany, Lieutenant Robert Morgan, bombardier aboard a B-17 nicknamed Memphis Belle, hunched over the most secret piece of equipment in the American arsenal. Through the plexiglass nose of his bomber, 25,000 feet above the North Sea coast, he watched the German port city materialize through breaks in the cloud cover. His hands gripped the control knobs of the Norden Mark 15 bombsight, a device the United States Navy Bureau of Ordnance had promised could place a bomb in a pickle barrel from 4 miles up. Morgan had heard the promises during training at Albuquerque Army Airfield. Instructors, speaking with the reverence of priests describing sacred relics, told bombardiers that the Norden bombsight represented the pinnacle of American engineering genius. One instructor, a former MIT mathematics professor, had shown them calculations proving that under ideal conditions, 50% of bombs dropped from 20,000 feet would land within 75 feet of the aiming point. Some instructors claimed even tighter circles, 50 feet, even 25. The device sitting before Morgan weighed 50 pounds, contained 2,000 precision-machined parts, and cost more than an entire B-17 bomber. Each bombardier had signed documents swearing to destroy the site with thermite grenades rather than let it fall into enemy hands. The penalty for compromising its secrets was death. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Through the eyepiece, Morgan tracked the submarine pens, massive concrete structures the Germans had built to protect their U-boat fleet. Intelligence reports indicated walls 12 feet thick, roofs reinforced with steel and concrete capable of withstanding direct hits from conventional bombs. The target required precision. Miss by 200 feet, and bombs would kill French civilians forced to work in the shipyards. Miss by 500 feet, and they'd hit residential neighborhoods. The Norden bombsight was supposed to make such misses impossible. Flak began bursting around the formation, black puffs of 88mm shells that rocked the bomber and filled the air with shrapnel. Morgan's hands remained steady on the bombsight controls, making minute adjustments as the device's gyroscopes whirred and its mirrors reflected the target image. This was the moment the bombsight was designed for, when human error yielded to mechanical precision, when training and technology merged to deliver destruction with surgical accuracy. The question that would haunt American strategic bombing for the remainder of the war crystallized in that moment over Wilhelmshaven. Could a device designed in the calm of a laboratory, perfected on bombing ranges in clear desert air, actually deliver on its promises when operated from a vibrating bomber, through layers of cloud, in the chaos of combat? The answer would reshape how America fought its air war, how it measured success, how it justified the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians, and ultimately how it understood the gap between technological promise and wartime reality. The Norden bombsight represented more than precision engineering. It embodied America's faith that superior technology could transform warfare into something clean, surgical, almost humane. What actually happened over Germany and Japan between 1943 and 1945 would shatter that faith completely, though the truth would remain classified for decades. The doctrine of precision daylight bombing had roots extending back to the 1920s, when American air power theorists, led by Brigadier General William "Billy" Mitchell, argued that strategic bombing could win wars by destroying an enemy's industrial capacity while avoiding the slaughter of trench warfare. Mitchell's disciples at the Air Corps Tactical School in Alabama developed these theories throughout the 1930s, creating elaborate target lists, identifying critical nodes in modern industrial economies. Destroy the ball-bearing factories, they argued, and tank production stops. Destroy the synthetic oil plants, and the Luftwaffe cannot fly. The theory required precision, the ability to hit specific factories while leaving surrounding areas intact. This doctrine stood in stark contrast to the British approach. After suffering catastrophic losses in daylight raids during 1939 and 1940, the Royal Air Force had abandoned precision entirely, switching to nighttime area bombing. Air Marshal Arthur Harris, commanding RAF Bomber Command, made no apologies. His bombers, lacking any equivalent to the Norden site, dropped their loads over entire cities, seeking to destroy worker housing, break civilian morale, and create firestorms that would consume square miles of urban landscape. British bombs killed indiscriminately, as intended. American military leadership rejected this approach, partly from moral conviction, partly from strategic calculation, partly from faith in American technological superiority. The Norden Bombsight made precision possible, or so the doctrine insisted. With it, American bombers could strike by day, when targets were visible, attacking the specific factories, rail yards, and refineries that sustained German war production. Civilians living blocks away from these targets would remain safe. This vision appealed to American sensibilities, offering a way to wage total war while maintaining moral distinction from the enemy. The United States Army Air Forces published this doctrine in field manuals, distributed throughout the growing bomber force. FM 100-20, Employment of Bombardment Aviation, issued in April 1940, stated explicitly that bombardment aviation's primary mission was destruction of hostile land and naval forces and the material resources necessary for their maintenance. The manual emphasized accuracy, stating that bombardment must achieve the maximum destructive effect with minimum expenditure of bombs and exposure of personnel. Every bombardier trained under this doctrine, learning that precision distinguished American bombing from German terror attacks on London or Japanese atrocities in China. By 1943, when the 8th Air Force began operations from England, this doctrine had hardened into religious conviction. General Ira Eaker, commanding the 8th, told reporters that American bombers would demonstrate precision bombing's superiority over British area attacks. His crews would prove that technology and training could transform bombing from crude bludgeon into surgical scalpel. The Norden Bombsight was the instrument that would make this transformation possible, the technological foundation upon which the entire American strategic bombing campaign rested. Carl Lucas Norden arrived in America from the Netherlands in 1904, a 24-year-old engineer trained at the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. He found work with the Cramp Shipbuilding Company in Philadelphia, then moved to the U.S. Navy's Bureau of Ordnance, where he spent World War I developing fire control systems for battleship guns. The experience taught him that accuracy required eliminating human variables, replacing judgment with calculation, substituting mechanical precision for human error. In 1921, Norden left the Navy and partnered with Theodore Barth, a businessman who provided capital for an independent venture. The partnership, initially called Norden Barth Corporation, later simply Carl L. Norden Incorporated, occupied a modest facility in Lower Manhattan. Norden's goal was ambitious: to create a bombsight that could guide bombs to targets with the accuracy of naval artillery, but from moving aircraft at altitudes previously impossible. The technical challenges were formidable. A bomb dropped from 20,000 feet took approximately 40 seconds to reach the ground, during which time it traveled horizontally with the aircraft's forward velocity while simultaneously falling under gravity's influence. Wind at altitude pushed the bomb off course. Air density affected its ballistic properties. The aircraft's speed, altitude, and angle of attack all influenced trajectory. Computing these variables required solving complex differential equations in real time, something beyond human capability under combat stress. Norden's solution was mechanical genius. His bombsight used a stabilized platform mounted on gyroscopes that maintained level reference regardless of the aircraft's motion. Mirrors and prisms created an optical pathway that allowed the bombardier to view the target, while the sight automatically compensated for aircraft movement. The bombardier input airspeed, altitude, and wind conditions into mechanical calculators. The sight then computed the precise release point where bomb trajectory would intersect the target. The Mark 15, the version that entered service in 1941, represented 15 years of refinement. It contained a directional gyroscope spinning at 7,000 revolutions per minute, providing stable reference. A displacement gyroscope measured aircraft drift caused by crosswinds. The bombardier made sighting adjustments using two control knobs, one for azimuth, one for range. As he tracked the target, the sight calculated ground speed and drift angle. At the computed release point, the sight automatically triggered bomb release, removing human reaction time from the equation. Testing at the Navy's Dahlgren Proving Ground in Virginia produced remarkable results. In clear weather, at moderate altitude, with experienced bombardiers, the Mark 15 achieved circular error probable, measurements of less than 100 feet, meaning 50% of bombs landed within 100 feet of the aiming point. Some tests showed even tighter patterns. These results convinced Navy and Army Air Corps leadership that precision bombing had become reality. Security surrounding the Norden site approached paranoia. Bombardiers guarded the devices during missions, carrying .45 caliber pistols with orders to shoot anyone attempting to examine the site without proper clearance. Each site traveled in a locked case. Bombardiers signed for them personally and faced court-martial for losing one. Training manuals classified the site's internal mechanisms as top secret. Guards at Norden's Manhattan factory carried submachine guns. The Navy assigned intelligence officers to monitor anyone with knowledge of the site's operation. This secrecy fed mythology. Newspaper articles, carefully vetted by military censors, described the Norden as America's secret weapon, the device that would win the war. Popular mechanics ran stories claiming the site could place bombs in pickle barrels. The Saturday Evening Post featured bombardiers as technical warriors, men who combined pilot skill with engineering precision. Hollywood reinforced these images in films like Bombardier, released in 1943, showing clean-cut American airmen destroying enemy factories with surgical strikes. Bombardier training began at Ellington Field in Texas or Kirkland Field in New Mexico, where men selected for their mathematical aptitude and steady nerves learned to operate the Norden site. The course lasted 18 weeks, longer than pilot training, reflecting the complexity of the device and the Doctrine's dependence on bombardier precision. Students spent their first month studying aerodynamics, ballistics, and the mathematics of bomb trajectories. They learned that a 500-pound general-purpose bomb dropped from 20,000 feet would take 39 seconds to reach the ground, traveling forward approximately 2 miles while falling 4 miles vertically. The classroom instruction was rigorous. Students calculated wind drift using slide rules, determined ballistic coefficients for different bomb types, and memorized altitude temperature tables that affected air density and bomb performance. They learned that a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind at altitude would push a bomb approximately 200 feet off course. They studied the difference between high-explosive bombs, which penetrated before detonating, and incendiary clusters, which dispersed hundreds of smaller bomblets across a target area. Each bomb type required different release calculations. Physical training with the Norden site began in ground-based trainers, mock bomber noses where students practiced tracking moving targets painted on warehouse floors. Instructors emphasized the site's sensitivity. A bombardier's breathing could disturb the gyroscopes. Tension in the hands transmitted vibrations through the control knobs. The best bombardiers, instructors taught, achieved a zen-like calm, becoming extensions of the machine, their hands moving with mechanical precision to keep crosshairs centered on the target. Advanced training moved to actual aircraft, initially twin-engine AT-11s flying training missions over bombing ranges in the New Mexico desert. Students dropped 100-pound practice bombs at targets marked with white circles on the desert floor. Observers radioed impact points, allowing instructors to calculate circular error probable for each bombardier. Students who consistently achieved set measurements under 200 feet graduated with bombardier wings and commissions as second lieutenants. Those who couldn't meet accuracy standards washed out, reassigned to navigator training or ground duties. The training created absolute faith in the Norden site's capabilities. Students who had watched their bombs cluster tightly around desert targets believed the device could replicate those results over Germany. Instructors reinforced this belief, telling students that the Norden site gave American bombers decisive advantage over German and Japanese forces. One training manual stated explicitly, "The Norden Bombsight is the most precise bombing instrument ever developed. Properly operated, It will place your bombs on target regardless of conditions. This promise became article of faith. Lieutenant James McLaughlin, who trained as a bombardier at Albuquerque Army Airfield in 1942, later recalled the confidence training instilled. "We believed absolutely that we could hit anything from any altitude," he wrote in his memoir. The instructors showed us photographs of practice bombs clustering within 50 feet of the aiming point. They told us German industry would crumble under our precision attacks. We believed them because we'd seen the Norden site work perfectly in training. Security protocols hammered home the site's importance. Before each training flight, bombardiers signed for their assigned Norden site, recording its serial number in logbooks countersigned by officers. After landing, they returned the site to secure storage, watching guards lock it in fireproof safes. They attended security lectures warning that German and Japanese intelligence services would pay fortunes for Norden site specifications. One lecturer claimed that enemy agents had attempted to infiltrate the Norden factory. Another repeated rumors that the Germans had offered $1 million for an intact site. This security theater reinforced Bombardiers' sense of importance. They were entrusted with America's most secret weapon, the technological key to victory. The responsibility was sacred. Captain Robert Morgan, the Memphis Belle's bombardier, remembered receiving his first Norden site at Walla Walla Army Air Base in Washington. "The armament officer made us swear on the Bible that we'd destroy the prize, a site rather than let it fall into enemy hands," Morgan wrote. "He showed us the thermite grenades we'd carry on every mission. Pull the pin, place it on the site, and it would melt into slag within seconds. That's when I understood this wasn't just equipment. This was the weapon that would win the war." The 8th Air Force flew its first heavy bomber mission against occupied Europe on August 17, 1942, targeting the railroad marshalling yards at Rouen-Sotteville in France. 12 B-17s from the 97th Bombardment Group dropped their loads from 23,000 feet through broken clouds. Post-mission reconnaissance photographs showed bombs scattered across the rail yards, some hitting tracks and rolling stock, others cratering empty fields hundreds of feet from the aiming points. The circular error probable for that first mission measured approximately 350 feet, significantly worse than training results but still respectable given combat conditions. Mission planners attributed the disparity to combat stress, mechanical issues with individual bomb sites, and the challenge of formation bombing, where only the lead bombardier actually used the Norden site while other aircraft dropped on his signal. They believed accuracy would improve as crews gained experience. The early missions reinforced this optimism. Attacks on targets in occupied France and the Netherlands, flown in relatively clear weather against light opposition, produced reasonable accuracy. 8th Air Force Headquarters issued press releases claiming precision attacks were destroying German military facilities while minimizing civilian casualties. The illusion shattered during missions deep into Germany during autumn 1943. The 8th Air Force launched a sustained campaign against Schweinfurt, a city housing 40% of German ball-bearing production. Intelligence analysts identified this as a critical bottleneck. Destroy Schweinfurt's factories, and German tank and aircraft production would collapse. The first Schweinfurt raid, flown August 17, 1943, sent 230 B-17s against the ball-bearing plants. German fighters attacked continuously during the unescorted penetration. Flak over the target was intense and accurate. Bombers weaved and jinked to avoid fighters and shells, making steady bombing runs impossible. Lieutenant William Carleton, bombardier aboard a B-17 named Cabin in the Sky, described the approach to Schweinfurt in his diary. "Fighters hitting us from all directions. The ship rocks from near-miss flak bursts. I'm trying to keep the crosshairs steady on the factory, but the pilot's taking evasive action. The bomb sight can't compensate for these violent maneuvers. I can see the target in my sight, but the gyros are tumbling. The whole aircraft shudders when our gunners fire. I toggle the bombs and hope they hit somewhere near the target." Post-mission reconnaissance revealed the grim truth. Of approximately 1,500 bombs dropped on Schweinfurt, only a small percentage hit the ball-bearing factories. Many fell in residential areas, killing several hundred German civilians and forced foreign workers. The Kugelfischer and Fichtel and Sachs plants sustained damage but continued production with minimal interruption. German engineers had bombs, dispersed critical machinery and stockpiled components, making the factories far less vulnerable than American planners assumed. The mission cost 36 B-17s shot down and killed or captured 360 airmen. The tactical and strategic results didn't justify the losses. The second Schweinfurt raid, October 14, 1943, produced even worse results. The 8th Air Force dispatched 291 bombers. German fighters destroyed 60, damaged 138 others. Approximately 600 American airmen died or entered prisoner of war camps. Bomb damage assessment photographs showed similar patterns to the August raid: scattered impacts, many misses, limited damage to actual production capacity. Schweinfurt's ball-bearing output declined only temporarily, recovering within weeks as Germans repaired damage and dispersed manufacturing. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. These missions forced uncomfortable questions. If the Norden Bombsight could place bombs in 75-foot circles, why were so many bombs missing by hundreds or thousands of feet? Why were bomber formations, each carrying a trained bombardier with a Norden sight, creating damage patterns that looked increasingly similar to British area bombing? The answers, documented in classified after-action reports, contradicted everything bombardiers had learned in training and everything the American public believed about precision bombing. Weather over northern Europe destroyed the fundamental assumptions underlying Norden Bombsight doctrine. Training had occurred over New Mexico and Texas, where clear skies prevailed 300 days per year. Germany lay beneath cloud cover approximately 250 days annually. The thick frontal systems moving across the North Sea and the European continent created solid overcast from ground level to 30,000 feet. Bomber crews flying missions during winter months often went weeks without seeing the ground. The Norden Bombsight required visual contact with the target. Its optical system magnified the bombardier's view, but magnification was useless when clouds obscured everything below. Missions scheduled against specific factories often found targets completely hidden. Bombardiers stared through their eyepieces at nothing but grey clouds, while flak burst around their aircraft and fighters attacked their formations. Mission commanders faced impossible choices: abort the mission and waste fuel and effort, or bomb through clouds using dead reckoning navigation and hope bombs fell somewhere near the intended target. Major Curtis LeMay, commanding the 305th Bombardment Group, developed formation tactics intended to improve bombing accuracy. His solution involved tighter formations where more aircraft dropped on the lead bombardier's signal, concentrating bombs on target rather than scattering them across the landscape. LeMay's groups achieved better results, but even his best missions showed circular error, probable measurements of 400 to 600 feet under combat conditions, 8 to 12 times worse than the 75-foot circles promised during training. Technical problems compounded weather difficulties. The Norden sight's gyroscopes required 15 minutes to stabilize after the bomber reached altitude. German fighters often attacked during this vulnerable period, forcing pilots into evasive maneuvers that tumbled the gyros and required restarting the stabilization process. The sight's electrical heating system, designed to prevent oil from freezing at high altitude, frequently failed. Unheated sights froze solid, their mechanisms seizing up at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, typical temperature at 25,000 feet. Maintenance crews worked desperately to keep sites operational, but mechanical failures grounded approximately 15% of assigned sites on any given mission. The human factor proved equally problematic. Bombardiers, trained in clear weather over empty desert, approached targets in Germany through walls of flak and swarms of fighters. The psychological stress of watching nearby bombers explode, of hearing shrapnel slam into their aircraft, of seeing crewmates die, made the calm precision required for accurate bombing nearly impossible. Lieutenant Robert Hansen, who flew 30 missions as a bombardier with the 91st Bombardment Group, described the reality. Everything we learned in training assumed steady, level flight with perfect visibility, and no one shooting at you. Combat was nothing like that. You're in the nose, watching fighters come head-on, closing at 500 miles per hour. Flak is bursting all around, rocking the ship. The pilot's taking evasive action. Your hands are shaking. You're trying to track the target through the bomb sight, but you can barely see it through the smoke and haze. You release bombs and pray they hit something useful. Formation bombing further degraded accuracy. While lead bombardiers used Norden sights, most aircraft simply dropped when they saw the lead ship's bombs release. Radio command systems allowed lead bombardiers to signal bomb release, but electrical interference, battle damage, and equipment failures often prevented these signals from reaching all aircraft. The result was ragged bomb releases, creating elongated damage patterns called bomb trains, stretching thousands of feet beyond the aiming point. Instead of tight clusters around specific factories, bombs scattered across entire neighborhoods. Altitude requirements imposed by German defenses pushed bombers beyond the Norden sight's effective range. Early doctrine called for attacks from 15 to 20,000 feet, altitudes where the sight could operate effectively, and bombardiers could identify specific buildings. German 88mm flak proved devastatingly accurate at these altitudes. By late 1943, mission planners routinely scheduled attacks from 25 to 28,000 feet, where thinner air and lower temperatures reduced flak effectiveness, but also reduced bombing accuracy. At these altitudes, target details blurred. Bombardiers aimed at city blocks rather than individual factories, transforming precision attacks into area bombing regardless of intent. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, established by President Roosevelt in November 1944, began systematic analysis of American bombing effectiveness. Teams of analysts, including civilian economists and military officers, examined bomb damage across Germany after the war ended. Their findings, published in detailed reports during 1945 and 1946, documented the vast gap between Norden bombsight promises and actual combat results. The survey analyzed approximately 900,000 tons of bombs dropped by the 8th and 15th Air Forces on European targets between 1942 and 1945. Investigators measured crater patterns, examined factory damage, interviewed German industrial managers, and studied production records. Their conclusion was unambiguous. The average circular error, probable for American daylight precision bombing throughout the European campaign, measured approximately 1,000 feet. In conditions of heavy cloud cover, strong winds, or intense flak, accuracy degraded to 3,000 feet or worse. Only approximately 20% of bombs dropped actually struck within 1,000 feet of the assigned aiming point. Specific target analyses revealed even more troubling patterns. The ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt, attacked repeatedly during 1943 and 1944, never experienced production declines exceeding 20%. German engineers dispersed manufacturing, stockpiled inventory, and repaired damage faster than American bombers could inflict it. The synthetic oil refineries, identified as critical bottlenecks, proved similarly resilient. Despite concentrated bombing campaigns, German fuel production didn't collapse until spring 1945, when ground forces overran refineries and Allied air superiority prevented repairs. Aircraft factories, submarine construction yards, and transportation networks showed similar resistance to precision bombing. The survey documented that American bombers attacking specific German factories typically destroyed or damaged only 30 to 40% of the structures within those factory complexes. The remainder of bombs fell on surrounding residential areas, killing approximately 300,000 German civilians during the strategic bombing campaign. This death toll approached the casualties inflicted by RAF area bombing, despite the American doctrine's explicit goal of minimizing civilian deaths through precision. The survey's most damning finding addressed the Norden bombsight directly. Under ideal conditions, clear weather, light opposition, moderate altitude, experienced crews, the device performed reasonably well, achieving circular error probable measurements of 200 to 400 feet. These conditions existed during fewer than 10% of combat missions over Germany. During the remaining 90% of missions, weather, altitude, flak, fighters, and mechanical failures reduced the Norden sight to little more than a crude aiming aid. The 75-foot circles promised during training never materialized in combat. General Karl Spaatz, commanding the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, received these findings with bitter resignation. Spaatz had defended precision bombing doctrine throughout the war, arguing that American methods remained morally and strategically superior to British area attacks. The survey's data undermined this position, revealing that American bombing had become area bombing in practice, whatever the intent. In private correspondence with Henry Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces, Spaatz acknowledged the uncomfortable truth. "We developed the world's most sophisticated bombsight and trained thousands of bombardiers to use it with precision," he wrote in July 1945. "Then we sent them to bomb through clouds, from extreme altitude, while under attack, making precision impossible. The fault lies not with the men or the machine, but with our failure to recognize that combat conditions would negate technological advantages." Colonel Orville Anderson, who directed bombing analysis for the 8th Air Force during the war, put the matter more bluntly in a classified report submitted in August 1945. The Norden bombsight worked perfectly in training and failed completely in combat, not because the device was flawed, but because combat in the European theatre made visual precision bombing impossible. We knew this by early 1944, but continued the precision bombing narrative for reasons of morale and propaganda. We should have admitted failure and adopted British methods openly, rather than pretending we could achieve accuracy we demonstrably could not. The human cost of this pretense was quantified in casualty statistics. The 8th Air Force lost approximately 4,500 heavy bombers destroyed in combat, with another 12,000 damaged. 26,000 American airmen died flying bombing missions over Europe. Another 28,000 became prisoners of war. These losses purchased strategic results far less decisive than pre-war doctrine had predicted. German industrial production actually increased during 1943 and 1944, despite sustained bombing, not declining significantly until ground forces threatened the homeland in 1945. The Pacific Theatre provided even more dramatic evidence of the Norden bombsight's limitations. Major General Curtis LeMay, transferred to command 21st Bomber Command in the Mariana Islands during January 1945, faced the task of attacking Japanese industry with the new B-29 Superfortress. The B-29 carried the Norden sight, along with every technological advancement American industry could provide. Early missions followed European doctrine, high-altitude daylight precision attacks against specific factories. The results were catastrophic. Japan's weather proved even worse than Europe's. Jet stream winds at altitude, reaching 200 miles per hour, scattered bombs miles from their targets. Cloud cover obscured targets during most missions. The Norden sight, unable to compensate for extreme winds and unable to see through clouds, produced accuracy even worse than European operations. Missions during January and February 1945 showed circular error probable measurements exceeding 2 miles. Crews were dropping bombs essentially blind, hoping they hit somewhere within Japanese cities. LeMay made a decision that completed the abandonment of precision bombing doctrine. Beginning March 9, 1945, he ordered low-altitude nighttime incendiary attacks against Japanese urban areas. B-29s would attack from 5,000 to 7,000 feet, below most anti-aircraft fire, dropping incendiary clusters designed to create firestorms in Japan's wood and paper cities. The Norden sight became irrelevant. Bombardiers simply released incendiaries over densely populated residential areas, making no pretense of hitting specific factories. The first such attack, against Tokyo on the night of March 9th through 10th, killed approximately 100,000 civilians and destroyed 16 square miles of the city. Similar attacks followed against Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, and dozens of smaller cities. By August 1945, American B-29s had burned approximately 180 square miles of Japanese urban area. killing between 300,000 and 500,000 civilians. These attacks bore no resemblance to the precision bombing doctrine that had justified the Norden site's development and deployment. LeMay defended the incendiary campaign on strategic grounds. Japanese industry relied on thousands of small workshops scattered throughout residential areas. Destroying these workshops required burning entire neighborhoods. The campaign's brutal effectiveness was undeniable. Japanese aircraft production collapsed, not because American bombs hit specific factories, but because the workshops producing components burned along with everything else. LeMay's methods worked, but they represented complete abandonment of precision bombing principles. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 represented the ultimate irrelevance of the Norden Bombsight. The B-29 Enola Gay carried a Norden sight, and Bombardier Major Thomas Ferraby used it to aim the Little Boy bomb at the Ioi Bridge in central Hiroshima. The bomb detonated approximately 800 feet from the aiming point, close enough to claim Norden sight success. But the weapon's destructive radius measured over 1 mile, making precision meaningless. The bomb would have achieved identical strategic effect if it had missed by half a mile. Colonel Paul Tibbets, who commanded the Enola Gay, later reflected on the irony. "We carried the most secret bombsight ever developed to deliver a weapon that destroyed an entire city," he wrote in his memoir. The Norden sight was designed for precision. The atomic bomb made precision obsolete. Both technologies emerged from the same impulse, using American technological superiority to win wars. But they pointed in opposite directions. One promised surgical strikes. The other delivered obliteration. The Strategic Bombing Survey extended its analysis to Pacific operations, producing similarly damning conclusions about precision bombing effectiveness. The survey's Pacific Summary Report, issued in July 1946, concluded that high-altitude precision attacks against Japanese industry had produced negligible results before LeMay's switch to incendiary area bombing. The Norden site, confronted with Pacific weather and Japanese defenses, had failed even more completely than in Europe. Survey analysts calculated that the approximately 14,000 tons of high-explosive bombs dropped on Japan during precision attacks between November 1944 and March 1945 had destroyed less than 5% of targeted industrial facilities. By contrast, the approximately 100,000 tons of incendiaries dropped during area attacks between March and August 1945 had destroyed approximately 40% of Japan's urban industrial capacity. Precision had failed. Area destruction had succeeded. The Norden Bombsight, the device that was supposed to make strategic bombing humane and precise, had been discarded in favor of methods more destructive than anything the Germans or Japanese had employed. The gap between Norden Bombsight mythology and combat reality remained classified for decades after the war. The Army Air Forces, seeking independence from the Army and establishment as a separate service, needed to justify strategic bombing's effectiveness. Admitting that precision bombing had failed would undermine arguments for an independent Air Force. Official histories published in the late 1940s and early 1950s maintained the fiction that American precision bombing had been strategically decisive and morally superior to area attacks. Carl Norden himself never acknowledged his device's combat limitations. He continued operating his Manhattan factory after the war, producing bomb sights for the new United States Air Force until his retirement in 1953. In rare interviews, he defended his creation's accuracy, attributing combat failures to operator error, inadequate training, or inappropriate tactical employment. He died in 1965, maintaining to the end that his bomb sight had performed exactly as designed and that any failures reflected misuse rather than fundamental limitations. The truth emerged gradually as documents were declassified and veterans wrote memoirs. The Strategic Bombing Survey reports, initially classified secret, became publicly available during the 1970s. Historians analyzing these documents discovered the vast disparity between promised and actual accuracy. Academic studies published during the 1980s and 1990s systematically dismantled the precision bombing myth, documenting how weather, altitude, and combat conditions had made Norden sight accuracy impossible. Veterans who had flown bombing missions often expressed complex feelings about their wartime experiences. Many remained proud of their service and believed they had fought honorably under difficult conditions. Others wrestled with guilt over civilian deaths their bombs had caused, deaths justified at the time by the promise of precision that never materialized. Robert Morgan, the Memphis Belle's bombardier, wrote extensively about these tensions in his memoir. "We were told we could hit specific factories from 25,000 feet, Morgan wrote. We believed it because we'd seen it work in training. Over Germany, we discovered it was impossible. But by then, we were committed to a bombing campaign that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians while often missing the military targets we aimed for. We were good men ordered to do something our technology couldn't accomplish, and we paid the price in lives and conscience." The Norden Bombsight's legacy extended beyond World War II into the Cold War era. The Air Force continued using evolved versions of the sight into the 1960s, though increasingly supplemented by radar and later laser guidance systems. The lessons of World War II bombing accuracy, however, were largely ignored. American strategic doctrine during the Korean War and Vietnam War continued to emphasize precision, despite repeated evidence that visual bombing under combat conditions remained inaccurate. Not until the development of laser-guided and GPS-guided weapons during the 1970s and 1980s did precision bombing doctrine become achievable in practice. Modern guided munitions routinely achieve accuracy, measured in feet rather than thousands of feet, delivering the precision Carl Norden had promised, but could never achieve with mechanical sights and ballistic bombs. The 75-foot circles finally became reality, but only through technologies Norden never imagined. The story of the Norden Bombsight reveals the persistent gap between technological promise and wartime reality, between laboratory performance and combat effectiveness. American military leadership, civilian population, and bomber crews themselves believed absolutely in the device's capabilities. That faith was built on legitimate training results, on genuine technological sophistication, on the desire to wage war more humanely than enemies who deliberately targeted civilians. But faith, however sincere, couldn't overcome weather, altitude, mechanical failure, and combat chaos. Lieutenant Robert Morgan, hunched over his Norden sight above Wilhelmshaven in May 1943, believed he could place his bombs precisely on target. He had been trained to believe this, had seen evidence of it, had sworn to protect the device that made it possible. What he couldn't know, what American strategic doctrine refused to acknowledge until evidence became overwhelming, was that the conditions necessary for Norden sight accuracy rarely existed in combat. The 75-foot circles remained a laboratory achievement, a training range success, a promise that combat would never fulfill. The price of that failed promise was measured in hundreds of thousands of civilian dead, in thousands of bombers lost, in decades of mythmaking that obscured strategic bombing's true nature. The Norden Bombsight worked perfectly until it encountered war. Then it revealed the truth that technological superiority alone cannot transform warfare into something precise, clean, or humane. That truth, learned painfully between 1943 and 1945, remains relevant whenever nations believe technology can make war surgical. War remains war, regardless of how sophisticated the tools. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.